Welcome everyone. Welcome to our writing lesson for today, which is related to poetry. The LI for this lesson today is to write your own version of a poem to show an understanding of onomatopoeia. Now, I did briefly mention onomatopoeia in the reading comprehension session, so let's first of all look very carefully at what is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is when a word describes a sound and actually mimics, or we use the word copies, the sound of the object or action. So onomatopoeia appeals to your hearing. So the writers use it to bring the story or the poem alive in the reader's head. And that's very, very important. You have to be able to imagine what is happening in the poem as you read it. So onomatopoeia is a good device for doing that. Right, below there are some common onomatopoeic words used. So for machine noises, we have the word honk, beep, vroom, clang, zap, boing. And there are animal names. Why is it called a cuckoo? Because it makes a cuckoo sound. And why is that bird called a whippoorwill? It's because it makes that exact sound, and so on. And if we look at impact sounds like boom, crash, whack, thump, bang, those are all to do with onomatopoeia. Now, I first came across onomatopoeia watching an old Batman movie. It was in black and white, and whenever the characters got into some kind of fight, you would see words like bam, boom, bosh, all those kind of sounds appearing on the screen as they were fighting. So that was my first real introduction to onomatopoeia. Let's now move on to the poem. And once again, listen carefully to the reading of this poem.
The Sound Collector. A stranger came this morning, dressed all in black and grey, put every sound into a bag and carried them away. The whistling of the kettle, the turning of the lock, the purring of the kitten, the ticking of the clock, the popping of the toaster, the crunching of the flakes. When you spread the marmalade, the scraping noise it makes, the hissing of the frying pan, the ticking of the grill, the bubbling of the bathtub as it starts to fill, the drumming of the raindrops on the window pane. When you do the washing up, the gurgle of the drain, the crying of the baby, the squeaking of the chair, the swishing of the curtain, the creaking of the stair. A stranger called this morning. He didn't leave his name, left us only silence. Life will never be the same.
Well, there you go. Some of you may have been able to answer the question in the reading comprehension about why will life never be the same. Well, of course, what's the sound collector been doing? He's been walking around collecting up all the sounds being made in the house. And what did he do with those sounds? Did you work that out? Right, so you've got task 1. Before we do any written poetry, you need to do a sound walk around the house and outside if you like. What are you going to be collecting? Well, of course, if you listen carefully to what you can hear, you will start collecting different sounds. So jot down the sounds you can hear and what is making that particular sound. Why do you need them? Well, you need those sounds because you're going to create a word bank of sounds. And you'll be able to use those sounds in your word bank to help you write parts of the verses to this poem. So once you have collected your sounds, you've been the sound collector, task 2 will be select at least 7 of your favourite sounds with their item. So for instance, if you had the word bang, that's the sound, and the item that goes with that onomatopoeic sound is hammer. What do you do next? Well, do you have any onomatopoeic words? If not, replace them. So how do you know if you don't have onomatopoeic words? Well, you could always use Google, couldn't you? You could always check on the internet, is this sound onomatopoeic? Right, so here's an example. If you wrote the singing of the birds, you will replace that sentence with the tweeting of the birds. And let's move on to the next step. Task 3 is your draft copy. So this is not your good copy, because you'll need to play around with what you're trying to create. So you're going to focus on creating your own version of verse 5. So if you look at the poem on the left, you can see number 5 on the left-hand side. That is verse 5. Now verse 5 has 4 different sounds. The crying of the baby, the squeaking of the chair, the swishing of the curtain, the creaking of the stair. So what you need to do is look in your word bank and select 4 sounds and their items. What comes next? You will then need to look at verse 4, line 1. So you'll need a sound with its item. So in line 1 of verse 4, you've got the drumming of the raindrops. So, for instance, I might have the banging of a hammer. And then line 2, where does the sound take place? Well, if I've got the banging of the hammer, I would then follow up on line 2, outside in the shed, possibly. It'll be up to you to decide where the sound takes place. Line 3, the activity being carried out. What is the activity? Well, if I look in verse 4, the activity is when you do the washing up. So, for instance, I could be doing when you're doing the ironing. And then line 4 would be the sound that goes with the activity. So for instance, if it was the iron, it could be the hissing of the iron. I think that goes. Verse 3 is your next target. So if you look at verse 3, line 1 to 3 involves selecting 3 more sounds from your word bank sounds. So put them in, and then line 4, you have to match line 3 with line 4. So for instance, they have the bubbling of the bathtub as it starts to fill. So you have to match those 2 together. So think about that one very, very carefully. Can you match them? And then task 4, you're going to write out a good copy, and if you have time, you're going to illustrate it. Now it's important that I understand that sometimes you may not have enough time. So the best thing to do is to try and complete as much as you can do, and then once you've completed as much as you can do, you know where to send it. So I look forward to reading your work, reading your poetry, and I will get back to you as soon as possible once you've emailed your work to me. So once again, remember, Miss Panata is in school this week, so I'm taking over the English for the next few weeks. So bye for now, speak to you tomorrow. Be safe.